Good morning, this is Jim Williams with the Hurricane City Tropical Update for August 29th around 11 a.m. I was waiting the 11 a.m. advisory from the National Hurricane Center on Erika, but at 9:30 this morning, the system was downgraded to a trough of low pressure. The hurricane hunters have been flying around out there. I'll show you that in just a minute. And they have not been able to close off a low-level circulation, even though there is an exposed low-level circulation. I'll show you that in a minute as well. But here is the live tower cam from Hurricane City in Delray Beach, Florida. And you can see that we've been anxiously awaiting the arrival of Tropical Storm Erika in southeast Florida, but it looks like this is not going to happen. So with that said, we're going to go ahead and just basically get a little bit of rain here over the next 24 to 36 hours, probably going into Sunday morning is when the worst weather will arrive for any effects in South Florida. We'll leave this cam up on Sunday so you can see the wind and the rain coming in on the backside of Tropical Storm Erika. Anyway, here is the Hurricane Hunter aircraft flying around out there this morning, and you can see that they have been unable to find any westerly winds. Notice the banding, the wind barbs on the image here, and you can see basically northeasterly winds around 26 knots. Southeasterly winds around 30 knots, and that's basically it. So the wind and rain is associated with this system on the right hand side and on the south side of the center of circulation. That's been the way it's been since the beginning with Erika, and I'm going to get into the forecast of Erika and how all the errors occurred with the models in just a minute. But this has been a lopsided system since day one, and you can see here there is no west winds on the barbs from the Hurricane Hunter, so that is the last advisory from the National Hurricane Center on this system. And you would like to think that this system is over with, but it may not be over with. There's some very warm sea surface temperatures out in front of this and a little bit of lighter wind shear, but I think the system has pretty much met its match with the wind shear. Let's go ahead and look at the latest visible on our system, and you can see the center is right about just south of Andros, southeast of Andros Island in the western Bahamas, and there's a little bit of thunderstorm activity trying to form around the center, and this is why I'm featuring Marathon at Hurricane City right now, because there's a chance that this could regenerate a little bit as it approaches the Florida Keys tomorrow morning, and maybe a tropical storm for the southwest Florida coast. In fact, that's my #1 impact area this year, is Naples to Port Charlotte on my top 20 picks, cities and islands this year in the Atlantic Basin. Already my #5 has been affected by a tropical storm that was in Matagorda, Texas, and my #1 is southwest Florida, so that it can include a hurricane or a tropical storm. It does not have to be a hurricane. We'll see if this regenerates tomorrow, and again, we'll have it live on hurricanecity.tv, whatever effects come into South Florida. So let's go ahead and look at some images here. And here was the visible earlier this morning of our system, and you can see it was right near, just south of southeast of Andros Island, near the central Bahamas. The low-level circulation popped out of the clouds, and it's been a sheared system ever since the beginning. Actually, the low-level center has been to the west of the convection, and it has not survived, and the main reason for that is wind shear. If you look at the analysis from the Wisconsin maps here, you can see basically westerly wind shear north of Puerto Rico, Hispaniola, and Cuba have been shredding the system for the past 48 hours, actually 72 hours of wind shear on this system. It's amazing that it's even survived considering the amount of shear that this system has had to deal with. Compared to Danny, which was a much smaller system, Danny could not sustain itself as it moved into the Caribbean, and it just got shredded. This one's lasted a little bit longer because it's a little bit of a larger system with a little bit of a better circulation, more broad circulation, but now it's finally met its match. The wind shear is just too much. And you notice down here in Panama area and Costa Rica, there's a little bit of a ridge of high pressure down here, and that's enhancing a little bit of the westerly shear over this system. So when it gets near Florida, it might be in a slightly more favorable environment, but it's going to run out of real estate. It's going to be too close to the state of Florida to develop into anything significant, so maybe weak tropical storm at best. Okay, now, the models have really been all over the place on this system. But before I get to the models, I just want to show you one image from Dominica. And this is the one tragedy about Erika that we're going to remember, is the amount of deaths and destruction that's happened down in Dominica. We've had 20 fatalities down there and flooding all over the island. I think I heard that 80% of the island is without power and has a lot of flooding in most of these areas. But they may still find some more people yet as they sift through the rubble of all the buildings that collapsed due to the flooding in the island of Dominica. And this island was not even in the cone of error for Tropical Storm Erika. The cone was further north of this island. In fact, the current feature at Hurricane City was St. Martin. Most of the forecast had Erika going over St. Martin, Antigua, and then heading just north of Puerto Rico. That never panned out. It went south of Puerto Rico, and the lopsidedness of this storm caused all this flooding down in Dominica, and we just wish the people the best of luck down there. It doesn't always take a hurricane to cause devastation, and any error in the track can have huge consequences. So the talk is, the models. How bad were the models? Everybody says garbage in, garbage out. The models are horrible, and we should just throw them all away and just chuck all the models out altogether. Because if you start out with bad data and bad position on the system, then the models are garbage down the road. So if they're not initializing the system right, then it's kind of not worth it to keep track of these models. But looking at the performance of these models, and the European model is not in this group, which is one of the historically best models out there. But here are the Canadian, the UK Met, the GFDL, the HWRF, the TVCN, and the GFS. The GFS model has been the overall best performer on Erika, and the GFS kept this as a weak system for days and days, going over the Greater Antilles and coming towards South Florida as a very weak system. And then over the days, the models flip-flopped, and especially the European model had it all over the place. It had it up near Bermuda at one point, and then it had it near the southeast coast, and then several runs it had it coming into South Florida as a tropical storm. The models were really erratic on this system, and you can see the error rates up here, this group of models. Some of them were off by 700 to 800 miles over a 5-day period. But again, the GFS was the best performer amongst all the bad models. But notice the tropical models in here, the GFDL, the HWRF, and the consensus models were still over 300 miles off. Now, interestingly, the NHC 5-day cone, on average, is off by about 225 miles. The average models over a 5-day period were off by 375 miles, so the National Hurricane Center outperformed the models overall, despite the fact that they were a little bit reluctant to shift the track a little bit south of Puerto Rico, which they probably should have done considering the steering flow. The overall performance of the National Hurricane Center on their cone is rather impressive. If you look at the 5-day cone here, this is from the first advisory from the National Hurricane Center. You can see that the cone stretches down to Haiti and eastern Cuba. They thought it could potentially be down in this area, and with a weak system like Erika was, the more southerly track would be possible. And they did have that in the original advisory from the National Hurricane Center, showing it could be down here right where it is right now. So the National Hurricane Center maybe was about 100 miles off from the current position of where it's at right now compared to where they thought it would be. That would be 8 p.m. tonight. They thought it would be in this position, and right now it's over here. So they're not that far off, despite the fact that it appears that they were way off on the forecast. So the National Hurricane Center did a pretty decent job on this. But the models, again, the GFS was the best performer overall at 173 miles off, and the worst of them was the Canadian model. That was off by almost 500 miles off on a 5-day track. As far as intensity, the GFS was off by about 21 knots over a 5-day period, and the GFDL was off by 16 knots, which I'm really surprised at because the GFDL really wanted to crank this thing up and head into the Bahamas, but that's obviously not happening, at least not in an intense turning north type of a track. Now here's the overall actual winds that took place in the path of Erika, and you can see that The tropical storm force wind field is kind of erratic here, but for the most part through the northern Leeward Islands, south of Puerto Rico. It did affect Puerto Rico. So all these areas are going to be included as a tropical storm, either a brush or a hit, in the Hurricane City database. And notice the islands here, including Cuba, are not going to be included in the tropical storm wind field in the post-analysis unless there's some kind of regeneration that occurs. Now, by the way, sea surface temperatures are rather warm down there in the Caribbean, 86 degrees. That was a ship from earlier this morning just south of Guantanamo. So there's piping hot water up in here, but it takes a lot more than hot water to allow a system to develop. You have to have upper level wind support for a system to develop. So anyway, in a nutshell, the Hurricane Center did a pretty decent job on the forecast on this. The models were very erratic on it, but overall, the expectations of dissipation were not really there in much of the model data at all. And there were several people on the internet that were indicating that this could dissipate over the Greater Antilles. I was one of them that thought that this could dissipate over the Greater Antilles. So always try to pay attention to all the forecasts that are out there, not just the official forecast, even though that's what you want to do when there's a hurricane approaching. But there's a lot of good forecasters out there that can see pattern recognition and understand that there's some wind shear and things aren't going to always turn out the way the models project that they are. In fact, at one point, all of the models had it going north of Puerto Rico, and none of them had it going south of Puerto Rico, and we know that's what happened. Anyway, I'm going to be live tonight at 9 p.m. Eastern Time on HurricaneCity.tv as we cover what happened with Erika and what the rest of the hurricane season may hold. We have the anniversary of Katrina and all kinds of things to talk about. 9 o'clock p.m. tonight, HurricaneCity.com/live or HurricaneCity.tv. Well, that's it for now. Follow us on Twitter at Hurricane City. That's it for now. We'll see you tonight on the live feed talking about the remnants of Erika. Thank you for watching.